focus on helping people to become more integrated into the communities. The Ability Beyond closed their workshop voluntarily in 2005. It was a process that they began, I think, in 2003. And over the course of their 3 webinars, they're going to talk to us about the resources and the tools that they used to make that transformation as smoothly and successfully as possible by really involving as many of the stakeholders in it as possible, as well as really reaching out into the community and developing partnerships across the board. So I want to just let people know this is the first webinar that Shaileen and Carrie will be offering us, and they're going to be offering 2 additional ones. One on September 16th, which will be about person-centered planning and shared decision-making and how that was essential to the process that they followed in doing their transformation. And then the 3rd webinar will be on September 28th, and that will be Zero Exclusion, 3 cups of tea, and rapid job placement. Those are techniques that they use as part of their workshop transformation, and those are also the principles of an evidence-based practice that is very commonly used in behavioral health called individualized placement and support. So at this time, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Carrie O'Connell and Shaileen Brighton-Ortiz, and let's see what we can learn from them today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this. I'm Carrie O'Connell. I will be the primary speaker, but Shaileen is also here as a backup to answer any additional questions. She's really our New York guru, so she'll be able to answer a lot of the questions that maybe I might not be able to, and also will be able to do this presentation in the future, so she's participating to learn a little bit more as well. So again, thank you, and thank you to NYSRA for having us participate. We like to say just from the very beginning that the process we went through was not perfect. It wasn't, there's no direct science behind it. It was just a model that we used starting back in 2003 to close our sheltered workshop. We didn't have a lot of people to go to because at the time there weren't a lot of organizations that were closing their workshops. So what we did was really a big learning experience for ourselves. We made a lot of mistakes along the way. We learned a lot of things, and we hope that what we're able to do for you guys is provide some tools, some recommendations, some lessons learned, and kind of just give you some of our feedback. So we've been partnering with NYSRA now for since February of 2015 through their initial BIP grant. We're excited to be able to participate through Transformation 2.0 through the Transformation Project also. And as Jill had just said, we're going to continue to do some different webinars to hopefully provide you with more resources as you go through the entire process of closing your sheltered workshop, which I know can be quite daunting. This is just a visual for all of you to see where we have come from since we closed our workshop in 2005. We talked through the need to always consistently evolve, and that even though your workshop at some point is officially closed, your work is never really done. So this chart shows that in recent years we have grown our clinical, employment services, community-based services to become the provider of choice in our geographical areas. We most recently started a consulting branch of our agency called Disability Solutions that provides corporate consultation to major customer or businesses that are looking to branch out and how and why they should hire people with disabilities. We started our first social enterprise called Roses for Autism in Guilford, Connecticut, which is like a complete online and retail rose business whose profits go back into a training program for individuals with disabilities looking to gain work experience or to find employment. So, I can't say enough how important it is that even after you shut those doors that you always have to be consistently evolving to be able to do more, to try different things, to provide employment services in different ways. So a little bit very quickly about who we are. Our mission is very simple. At Ability Beyond, we celebrate the ability in all people. We started in 1953, like I'm sure many organizations, by a group of families who wanted a better life for their sons, daughters, family members, and we've grown tremendously throughout the years. We have 2 headquarters, one in Connecticut, in Bethel, Connecticut, and the other in Chappaqua, New York. The sheltered workshop that we closed was in Connecticut. So again, there's a lot that we've now been able to do in New York. from our learning experiences in Connecticut, but we want to make that aware to you as New York providers that it was a Connecticut-based workshop that we closed. We support 2,500 people a year over that at this point, and we're in the geographical locations that you see on the slide. Back in 2003, our workshop was our largest funded program. We served 189 individuals with all different types of disabilities. It took us nearly 3 years to complete and close our workshop. We had goaled it to be 2 years, but again, we didn't make that. We were able to succeed in closing our workshop in 3 years. We do think that it's important for you to be able to at some point just say the doors have to shut and have a goal and make that goal happen, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get further into the presentation. But we were among one of the first in the Northeast to close a sheltered workshop. We changed our name along the way. We used to be called DATAR, and that was an acronym for a company that we no longer stood for. So throughout this whole process, we changed our name and evolved in that way too. And we followed, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but the GE's Change Acceleration process was our project management tool from start to finish on how to close our workshop. And again, we also feel like that's an important thing for you to have some sort of process or some sort of system that you're following to make this happen. So this is the GE Change Acceleration process. It's a very quick slide, but we were lucky enough that we had board members on our board of directors who were from GE and who they have always been following the CAP process for all of their different projects that they do as an organization, and said that they wanted to try it out with us to see if it would work for this process. So we adopted it. We met with members of GE, different employees, and we had a couple of long days of group sessions where we sat in conference rooms and they taught us about the process, and we did a lot of process planning and had post-it notes all over the walls, and we started our process together with them, and they did help us throughout probably the first year and a half, and then slowly kind of faded away once we were taking the reins and being able to do this on our own. We thought it was very important to have a mission for our project, so all of our committees and all of our stakeholders, everyone involved, knew where we were and where we wanted to be by 2005. So this is our mission for the project. Ability Beyond will transform day and work services into integrated, community-based services by providing people with options based on their individual preferences and abilities by January 1, 2005. Again, we didn't meet the January 1, 2005 deadline. It was actually September 1st, but we did it, and we just kept moving ahead. So getting started, with the change acceleration process and with GE's support, we built these different committees that you see on the slide here. All of the committees had different stakeholders from across our organization, anywhere from DSPs to program managers, to board members, to community members, to individuals that we served, to people from HR and our IT department. We involved all stakeholders because we felt like if our organization was going to be able to achieve this huge transformation, everyone needed to be a participant and everyone needed to be bought in. And we can't stress enough how we felt that that was extremely important, that everyone was bought into this process. So we created these 6 committees. Strategy, they identified the infrastructure to support the overall success of the project. The buy-in committee, they needed to get all staff, families, stakeholders to support this whole entire project. Consumer interest, we needed to discover what interested the individuals that we served and how we could achieve providing that for them. Identify and match community resources. They identified accessible options in the community that matched what the consumer interests were. We had a transportation committee. They needed to get people to and from locations throughout the community. We needed to know how many vehicles we needed, how to make sure the vehicles were getting to and from all of the different locations that we weren't traditionally going to because we were in a workshop setting. And then community participation was our 6th committee, and they provided, they created the choices to the individuals we served in the community. Each team identified their own individual team mission statement to support the overall goal of this process. Each team, as I said, was comprised of staff from all sectors of our agency, as well as all stakeholders, as I mentioned. And I can't drive that message any further, because I think it's really important that you have everybody bought into this so that everyone has overall buy-in. For over a year's time, the teams worked on all of the detail and logistics before we felt comfortable to launch a pilot in 2003, and we started a pilot at that time to make sure that all the things that the committees were working on could actually work. So in a little bit more detail, I just wanted to also say that this PowerPoint is there's a lot of words, and that's done on purpose because we want you to be able to take this PowerPoint and bring it back to your organization and use it as a tool as you move forward in your process. So we apologize in advance, there's so many words. But the strategy committee identified the infrastructure to support the overall success. So they created a financial plan, technology plan. A very important tool for us was our risk management plan, which we welcome you to, if you'd like to look at it as something as a tool that you would like to use or adapt, you can definitely do that. They looked at our current staffing and where we might need to increase staff, because again, if you're going from a workshop setting of having ratios looking a little bit different to now being out in the community and making sure everyone is safe, you do need to increase your staff. And then staff retraining. We knew that we had to start training staff on different techniques. It's a lot different than sitting in a workshop than being out in the community, and responsibilities change. So we redefined what our training looked like and started to offer some additional trainings, one of which is that 3 cups of tea that Jill spoke about that we'll do in a webinar in the future. Individual interests. We needed to discover the interests of the people that we work with. So we developed an interest survey where at every team meeting or at individuals' staff meetings, because we had different staff meetings that would go on in the workshop setting where we collected the feedback of the people that we served, we would do these individual interest surveys, and we would ask the questions of, what are your interests? What are some of the things you've always thought about that you wanted to do but never had the opportunity to do? What are places that you've always thought would be really cool to work at? And is it just that it looks cool, or do you know a lot about what happens in that type of job? So we wanted to hear about what were the things that people wanted to experience and what we needed to plan for. Everything was done in open-ended questions, and we asked questions obviously around work and employment, around volunteer opportunities, and also leisure. Our ultimate goal back then, starting in 2003, was not that everyone would be employed at the end, but that everyone would be in the community, as you can see back to what our mission stood for. Today, obviously, things are changing, and employment is the ultimate goal for everybody. But back then, we wanted to make sure people were getting well-rounded schedules of what they chose. So some people would say that they wanted to work full-time, and some said they didn't want to work at all, and some actually did retire. We offered a retirement program. Some people wanted to work a little and volunteer a little. So we wanted to make sure that we captured all those interests so that we could create the schedules that people needed. Identifying and matching community resources. We needed to identify accessible options in the community. So we had a team of employees or a team of stakeholders that would go out into the community and try to make sure that, even if we just assumed we could go to a place in the community, was it accessible? Was it a welcoming feel when you entered that place? Did we need to talk to any people at that place to be able to say, we want to start bringing different groups here, or we're looking for employment? Did we need to do any education to the community? We needed to better understand our job market, because clearly the only job market we knew in our area was that of piecework and sheltered workshops. So we needed, if people were looking for different types of jobs, competitive work, we needed to know what existed and how we could get into it. We created a site assessment tool that we would go out into the community and our staff would collect different feedback. We can share this also with you to say if it was a good place for a leisure opportunity, volunteer or work opportunity, and what we needed to maybe fix before going out to that site. And then during our pilot phase, we tested what the individual's interests were to what the actual place or employment opportunity looked like to make sure that people were satisfied with what the opportunity was. Our transportation committee was huge. We were able to, and this is a big part of our project, we closed our headquarters the way where it existed in Brookfield, Connecticut, and we were able to sell our building in order to have some of the dollars to reinvest into this project. And with some of those dollars, we also increased our fleet, which is, a huge expense, but it needed to be done because, again, we weren't going from everyone coming to one central location to people now coming to our hub location, but going out into all different opportunities in the community. So we developed the accessible community transportation system. We purchased a GPS system so that we knew where all of our vehicles were at any given time, so that we could maximize our fleet. We purchased dispatch software. We hired a dispatcher. That role has changed since then, but at the time, someone who was able to oversee all of that and knowing where the vehicles are going and coming from. And just made some internal efficiencies, being able to utilize vehicles during their downtime. And for example, again, going back to the buy-in of this, if you have all stakeholders involved, including your residential programs, as I'm sure with many of your organizations, you're in some of your group homes, maybe the vehicles aren't being used in the middle of the day or in the evenings, but now people are going everywhere at different times of the day, whether at night or in the middle of the day, and we started to use those vehicles when they had downtime. And by having the dispatch software, we knew where the vehicles were, we knew which vehicles were idle, and we were able to maximize our routes that way. Community participation, we needed to provide creative choices. So we tested all of this committee tested all of the other teams' findings and provided recommendations back. They developed our first pilot, which I mentioned we did about a year into the project. They implemented the pilot, again, provided feedback to the teams. And it was a turning point for our project because this is when our pilot was really when people started to say, oh, this could work. This actually is going to happen. The individuals we serve are really happy. Okay, now we have to take it from a pilot and we have to make it work for everybody that's in our workshop. So this is a very big committee that we had. And I think that buy-in is the most important committee as it relates to communication. And I know I keep talking about buy-in, but I think it's so important. As it states here, it is necessary to have the support of everyone involved as much as possible prior to beginning this initiative with clear messaging and expectations. For us, I think our hardest group was staff because we had staff that had been in the workshop for many, many, many years and couldn't picture how they would be able to do this work in the community. We're really resistant to the change. They're very influential, as I'm sure you all know, on the people that we serve. So if they were bought in, then the people that we serve are a little bit more bought in. They're a lot of times the first point of contact with family members, so it helps us to get family buy-in. But that was probably our biggest challenge was staff. But what we did is we created individual communication plans for all of these stakeholders listed here, and we can share some of that with you as well. But we thought it was important for the people we serve, family members, staff, community members, and board of directors to know this was happening, to keep them in the loop throughout the process, to give them each kind of an elevator speech so that they knew where we were today and that it was going to look different in the future. Sorry, I should have taken this one out, but we've done this presentation before, and we get a lot of organizations, get different organizations together to have some discussion about where they are within the process and some of the concerns that they're having and learn from each other. So again, for buy-in for the people that we serve, these are some of the tools that we created, and again would be, at the end we're going to tell you a little bit about a resource page where you can get some of the information that I'm talking about and some of the tools if you're interested. But for the individuals, for our consumers, we created an elevator speech. We did a list of frequently asked questions so that our staff were able to answer and address questions prior to them asking them and having the right message. We did the interest survey that I spoke about. we did a conversation guide about closing the workshop and kind of addressing a lot of the fears that they might have had. The biggest fear for the people that we served was that they saw their friends every single day in the workshop all day long, and it was a great social time for them, and it was going to be very hard for them to not see their peers on a day-to-day basis. We took that into consideration. We made sure that, after we collected their feedback on the things that they wanted to do, that there's always time for them to still either participate in an activity with some of their friends, to see them in the morning at our hub location or in the afternoon, and really it didn't become a big issue once we started to implement the pilot. We did surveys. We did surveys with everybody. We did pre and post surveys to get how people were feeling prior to doing anything and how they were feeling after, to make sure that we were always addressing any issues or changing things as we had to. We, as I spoke about, did individual team meetings where we talked about this, and we did our monthly consumer meetings. So we would sit down every month with the individuals in the workshop in different groups and just talk about where we were today, where we're going tomorrow, some of the experiences that they've already participated in, some of the things they were going to try in the next month, just to constantly make sure that they felt like they were a part of this process. This is a handout for you also, so that you don't have to read it like this. I know it's a very, very long slide, but again, we wanted you to have this as a tool. So this is just an example. You don't have to use it, just something that we wanted to put together for you guys to use as an elevator speech if, in fact, you needed one. It just kind of helps you along the way. Buy-in for our families. Again, that was another large stakeholder group that we had to make sure knew what we were doing throughout the entire process. So some of the tools that we provided for them is that we did family forums, and those forums were located in the communities in which they lived in. So we did them at local libraries, we did them at different restaurants, we had them at different town halls, and we went to where our families were and tried to be very proactive and address all of the questions that they might have. And we did those, I want to say every other month. We talked about where we were going, and we talked about what we had done. We did the elevator speech for them as well, the FAQs for them. They were obviously a part of the team meetings. Our CEO sent a letter to them. In this day and age, it would be all over our Facebook account, and it would be on Instagram, and we'd have it on Twitter, and we'd have it on our website, just saying, this is an announcement from our CEO, and this is coming from the CEO, not just from, maybe the staff you communicate with on a day-to-day basis as a family member. We did a knowledge survey with them as well, and then we were always pumping out different testimonials for them so that they could see that such and such person is now working, and it's going really well, and it's, might not be the exact schedule that they had when they were working in the workshop, but the person's really happy, or that the person that they thought was going to have extreme behaviors in the community is actually seeing a decrease in behaviors. But we thought it was really important to always provide success of what we were doing to keep people motivated and knowing that, we were able to build momentum and keep going. Buy-in for our staff. I talked a lot about this, but again, I really felt like this was the most important group for us for so many different reasons. And the buy-in with our staff, we, as I mentioned, included every type of staff in our organization in this process, and I think that's really important. So if you are an organization where your day and work programs are very different from your residential programs, you really should include your residential programs because they should be involved in this process. The larger buy-in you have, the easier the process is. Including people from all different types of committees in your organization or different departments is important too, because there might be something you need along the way, and if they're already bought in and they're already a part of the process, it makes it that much easier. So we did the elevator speech for them, the FAQs. We did a huge risk management plan, and within that we created a lot of tools that we're proud of and we continue to use today. We created a little communication card. It's like the size of a business card, and we give it to all of our staff, and it has a quick message on it that says that they work for Ability Beyond. If you have any questions or concerns about something that you're seeing, here's a number that you could call. So if we had a staff that had to be dealing with something like a behavior in the community and there's a community member questioning what they're doing, they can hand over the card and not have to at that moment give them a rundown of what's going on, but they could call into a number and address any of their questions or concerns about what they had seen. And for staff, they felt a lot more comfortable being able to have that. We created the community property damage procedure, which, knock on wood, we have not had to use that much, but again, it was a very proactive tool that staff felt comfortable knowing how to handle if something were to go awry in the community and something was to be broken or hurt. We created a resource backpack, which we also call our workshop in a bag, where we took a backpack and we put pretty much everything that you could think of that goes into the workshop that you might use on a day-to-day basis into this backpack. So it had wipes in it, it had cups, it had water for passing out medications, it had all information on who to contact in case of emergency. It had chucks in it and gloves. It had just a first aid kit, suntan lotion, all of the things that they might feel that they would need. And we still continue to use those now to this day. We have a staff that's identified in each program who's responsible for making sure that they're looked at the end of the week and making sure that they are full of all of the different pieces of equipment that they need, and so that they're always ready when staff are going out into the community. We developed staff job expectations and accountability. One of the biggest things we did is we decided that everyone, no matter where you worked, if you worked in a group home or if you worked in the workshop or if you worked in a day program, that you all were under one job description, which is a direct support professional, so that everyone understood that this was part of their role. No longer am I just a residential staff or just an employment staff. Now I understand that this is a piece of what I'm supposed to do and it's an expectation of me. As I spoke about, we revised and enhanced our staff training. That was just to be really proactive and make sure that staff knew that they had all of the different tools that they needed when going out into the community. We did a lot of weekly emails. We did bulletin boards around the organization. We have an intranet now that we use to communicate what we're doing and how we're doing. Social media, became a mandatory update at each of our staff meetings that all staff would at least have this be a topic for a couple minutes at every staff meeting so they knew what was going on in the process of closing the workshop. Our senior management rotated throughout all different staff meetings to make a presence and answer questions and address any concerns or questions. And then we did a staff incentive for finding and building leads, which I will talk about later on. Or right now. Now is later on. Sorry about that. So example of the bonus process for our staff. So we went from, again, being in one workshop to having a need of finding all different activities, employment opportunities, volunteer opportunities in the community. And we knew our staff were our best resource. They shopped in the community, got their hair cut in the community, worked at other part-time jobs in the community, and we wanted them to network with all of their different contacts and say to them, hey, would you mind meeting with someone from our organization and just to talk about what we're going through and what we're doing and seeing if there's any potential here for some of the people that we serve. So we created a little bonus process for them, which really got staff bought into. I mean, money talks a little bit, and it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit of an incentive to help us out with this. So as this slide said, who was eligible? And we made it eligible for all employees across our organization. What did you have to do? You have to talk to someone that you know that may have some sort of opportunity for someone that we serve in the sheltered workshop. And then how do you get the bonus? So the first bonus was you made the meeting, the face-to-face meeting. The second bonus would be awarded when the potential employer hired someone or when it became an actual volunteer opportunity. And then if the opportunity lasted for over 30 days, you got an additional $50. So again, I mean, it wasn't a ton of money, but it really helped everybody. It helped them to be bought in and helped us to gain all the opportunities that we needed to create. How did we include the community, another large stakeholder? We felt like, and again, many years have come and gone since we did this, but at the time we felt like the community really needed to be educated on what we were doing. We were known as this organization at the time that just had this sheltered workshop and had some group homes, but didn't, this was new to the community where we existed. So we wanted to make sure that they knew everything that was going on as well. So we did a press release. We did an elevator speech for them as well, so that staff or family members or whoever is talking in the community knew what to say about what we were doing. We had communication cards that we sent out to different employers, different locations that we would be frequenting. We did billboards, radio ads, FAQs, and we did employer testimonials. So as we started to build more employment opportunities and as we started to see success for the people that we serve, we started to share those stories. And employers would say, fine, I'll admit it, I had a fear about hiring someone with a disability, but let me tell you about my experience and how great it's been. And we would blast those on the radio, in the newspaper, and in any of our own communication that we did internally and externally. This is what our billboard looked like. It was pretty simple. It just said employers wanted, and it had a phone number. And we didn't give too much information because we wanted to make sure, we just wanted to kind of hook someone. And once they called into the number, we could answer the questions and hopefully get a face-to-face meeting with them or an appointment or another follow-up to be able to talk through what we were looking for. So this is just an example of what we did. This is another example of an article that we were very happy to be able to get in the New York Times Connecticut section about what we were doing, why we were doing it, and why it was so important. Some of the buy-in that we did for our board, we felt like we knew in the beginning we had a couple board members who were questioning why we were doing this and weren't really all that bought in. But very quickly they were probably our most bought in group of stakeholders. But we felt it was very important for them to be kept in the loop throughout this entire process too, because most of our board members are so well known in the community that they could really communicate this out to a larger group too. So again, same kind of thing, elevator speech, FAQs. We did some legislative information for them. We had board champions, people who really were so bought in that they would speak about it at every one of our own board meetings to make sure that every other board member was just as bought in. We, of course, were always providing them with positive feedback and the not so positive feedback so that they knew that, this wasn't a perfect process, that we were trying and some things were working and some things had to be modified, and the financial plan that we also created. So overall, we had a lot of positive impacts. A lot of the things that we thought were going to happen, or a lot of the fears that we had, did not happen. Yes, we deal with different things on a day-to-day basis, just like I'm sure all of you do. But overall, the impact for the people we serve, for our family members, our staff, the community, our funding sources, has been really very positive. The people that we serve have kind of increased their sense of accomplishment, and they're increased their self-esteem, their personal growth. They feel like their skill building has increased. They have more options when they're in the community. Our family members are more satisfied and more confident. They are happy to see that their loved ones are doing things that they are happy to be doing, and to be doing things that they never thought they would be doing. Our staff really, we had staff, and we're not gonna lie, we had a few staff that left that this wasn't for them. It was too much of a change for them. But we had staff that, we still have staff here today that have been here since 2003 and rave about it because it broke down the monotony of their job, and it gave them a whole new routine. Community organizations, that we increased businesses' awareness about the abilities of people with disabilities. We improved their knowledge and understanding. They gained a definite acceptance of people with disabilities as contributing members of the community rather than maybe some of the stigmas they had once had. And at our time, we were convincing our funding and referral sources. As we all know in New York, this is something we all have to do by 2020, but for us, we had to convince our funding sources that this is the way we wanted to go back then. So we always say it's very important to keep communicating. These are some of the things that we're doing now, but we try to communicate as much as we possibly can with all of our stakeholders, even to this day, so that they're staying up to date on what we're currently doing. So employment is everyone's business, as we all know. We incorporate employment best practices and try to do that throughout all of our work, and we try to make sure that all of our employees know about employment across the organization, and why we're trying to have employment be the primary goal for people with disabilities. We believe that employment begins from day one, so even if you enter Dayhab or if you're entering into our residential program or whatever program you might come to start at our organization, that you know that employment is our primary goal and that everyone will have an employment goal. We remain current on legislation and federal tax credits and how we can work with employers to teach them about federal tax credits and benefits that they might be eligible for. We do job carving. I'm sure many of you do that now. We've looked at some of our locations that provided piecework when we used to be in the workshop. One of our largest employers was willing to modify their work location and have us go to their work site rather than bringing their work to our workshop. So, I mean, looking at that as an opportunity. We're big on customized employment techniques. I talked a little bit about disability solutions in the very beginning, but that's the corporate consultation model where we're going to businesses and saying, instead of it being charity, it's the right business move. You should be hiring people with disabilities. And maybe instead of just talking about the one person that you should hire with a disability, how hiring a group of people with disabilities across an organization, not all within the same department, let's say, but can be beneficial to them as a business. We do a lot with transition services, and doing transition services. Obviously, all of us are through WIOA earlier and earlier, so that we can understand individuals with disabilities employment goals at an earlier time and try to make those happen quicker. We do a lot of internship development. We have created in both states, some different internship year-long programs where we give people the opportunity to try out different work opportunities, see what they like, see what they're good at, see what maybe additional education or training they might need to be able to accomplish that job down the line. We do a speakers bureau where the people that we serve go out to different employers or to different schools or to really whomever is interested to speak about themselves to continue to spread the knowledge about people with disabilities into the community. We have a family committee where we meet every other month, I believe, and we have a family meeting at night, and we continue to communicate to the families that come to those meetings or call into those meetings about what we do. And we offer that in Connecticut and in New York. And as I mentioned, our internet and social media, of course, has been huge as a way for us to continue to communicate what we're up to. So I spoke extremely fast, so I apologize for that. But it's this is intended, again, just to give you just an idea of us as an organization, who we are, what we've done, what we learned, what we can share with you. We do have we have a soft launch of our new resource page on closing a sheltered workshop at abilitybeyond.org that you can view and look at and see some of the tools that I referenced. We just know that this is a huge undertaking and that it can be quite daunting, and that sometimes not having maybe the right process in place or the right resources can make you hit some roadblocks. So if we can be here as a support or as an additional resource, we're happy to do that. So at this time, it's about 12:45. We would like to open it up to questions, if that's okay with you, Jill and Nicole.
Are there any questions for Carrie and Shaileen? You can, raise your hand and Nicole will unmute you. You're all muted right now. I did have one question while people are raising their hands. I'll ask this question. This is from Darlene, and she's asking, what does your retirement program look like?
Ah, that is a great question. I'm sorry I didn't talk about that. So we have a company right in town, one town over from us, called Almost Home, and they're an adult daycare provider, not for people with disabilities. And we had approached them and said, we had about, I think we had 15 people that wanted to retire. That was their goal. And we had gone to them and said, have you ever thought about an integrated model? And they were skeptical, but they wanted to try it out. So together we came up with a model where they became integrated into their site, and it's been nothing but successful. Over time, our population continues to age. We've increased our contract a little bit with them to be able to do that, but it's been very successful. So that's more or less what our retirement model looks like. I hope that answers your question.
We have another question from Francis. How many individuals working at minimum wage or higher in the community, and how many are volunteering?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and I'm the first to say that we didn't track data well at all. Now we do. Now we, of course, we have a whole system where we're tracking all of that. But at the time, that wasn't our ultimate goal. We had, I want to say, our percentages were that we had roughly, well, I shouldn't use percentages, but out of the 189 people, we had at least half of them working at least an hour a week, at least making minimum wage. So it wasn't about like getting 40 hours, it wasn't about getting 30 hours, it was about getting people some sort of opportunity at the time. Today, our ultimate goal is competitive wages, and I think all of ours is that goal, but at the time it really wasn't. So and I apologize that we don't have the exact data for that.
We have another question from Linda. How many people did you have in your original workshop?
We had 189 individuals in our original workshop when we had first started this process.
And Nicole, are there any hands raised?
I do have 2 hands raised. Peggy, I've unmuted you if you'd like to speak. Peggy DiMartino. Hello.
How did your funding work as you transitioned from workshop to community-based services? How are you actually supporting your operation?
How did it work? Peggy, you're asking, so how did it work when we first started this? Again, when we started in 2003, we had to convince our funding sources that this was something that we needed and wanted to do. It wasn't something they were telling us to do. So we worked alongside all of our case managers and different people within our state funders to say, how can we modify the way contracts look or the way individuals' budgets look to be able to pull this off? So we were the ones that were pretty much instrumental in telling them that we had to modify it so it wasn't that we were being funded for sheltered employment any longer. We needed to be funded for something else which looked like what we were doing. So that took a lot for us. It took a lot of time and a lot of resources to be able to build that out. Today, obviously, it looks a lot different. I don't know if Shaileen will speak to that briefly.
And it's probably the same thing today. The difference is that you would not have to convince your funder. What you would be doing at this time would be identifying what would be the program that the individual would be moving on to, whether that would be a Without Walls program, whether that would be Pathways to Employment, whatever it is, and then you would seek funding for that. If currently I think the funding for the sheltered workshop, that involves brick and mortar. It's obviously if they're going into a Without Walls model where employment is involved in internship, then the funding would be different. It would be a Without Walls funding. It would also be, you also seek funding from Access Bureau to support the employment piece of it.
So,
Peggy?
Is there another question, Nicole?
yes, we have a couple people that wrote in, but I want to get to the folks that did raise their hand. Again, Marie O'Connor-Berry from Putnam ARC. I have unmuted you if you'd like to ask your question aloud. Hello, Marie? Okay, we'll move on to the next person. William Melville, you typed a question in, but if you'd like to ask it aloud, I've unmuted your microphone.
Oh, maybe I will. So the question, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so the question is, if the individuals only work 1 hour in the community, like you said in the beginning, what do they do for the rest of their day?
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, today it would have to look a lot different. So back then, when we did our individual interest surveys, we asked them what they wanted to do, and a lot of people would say, I want to have a blended day. I want to have a day where I'm doing some work and I'm doing some volunteer or some community activity, whether it's leisure, recreational, what have you. So a lot of our people did a mix of all of that. And we know that hours is a big question. So if people are going from, say, being in a workshop for 30 hours and their families know that that's where they are and they're taken care of, they might continue to want that 30 hours of program. We fulfilled it with things that they were, at the time, looking to do. So we still have yoga classes, we had a theater group, we have a music group, we have volunteer opportunities in food pantries, at a local church. At a senior center, we have the different gym opportunities, arts and crafts classes. We do a lot now around internships and building employment opportunities, so we're always going on different tours or job shadowing. We created Disability Mentoring Day as a national program in October for 3 days. We adapted that, and we started to do Disability Mentoring Days where you go into a place of employment and learn from them about what the job is like, to see if people, like I said, do you really want to be a pilot or do you just like planes? So just getting people to gain experience in their communities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Kind of in that same line, Marie O'Connor has typed in her question, and she's asking, what type of alternatives to work were you able to offer people who had limited work volunteer opportunities? And I guess maybe I'm just kind of reading into this, Marie, and if you can unmute and speak, that would be great. But maybe for those people who had really no interest in work at all, what kind of opportunities were available to them? Would that be like the theater group, or I think you had a book club?
So we created the activities that we have based off of those interest surveys. So we collected the data from that. It was one place where we did collect good data. And that's when we took one of our committees, our community committee, and said, okay, let's go find those. So if we had a few people that wanted to do a theater group or a few people that wanted to start going to the gym, that's when we created those types of opportunities for them. Or again, if someone didn't want to work but they wanted to retire, that's something that we allowed them to choose to do. So it was just by offering a variety and trying to fulfill everyone's individual interests.
So it sounds like you were very person-centered in your approach, and I think this is probably something you're going to explore in greater depth when you do the second webinar.
Correct. Yes. Yep. And we have to be person-centered throughout this entire process. We tried to make it as individual as we can. We tried to make groups as small as we possibly could, so that it wasn't a whole group of people going out and doing something in the community, but we tried to do it that it was more individually based, smaller, like 2 to 3 people at a time. We did skills assessments with individuals to know where their skill was at now and where their skill was after, or where their skill needed to be after in order to work in the community. So we partnered with Access VR in New York and VRS in Connecticut.
So we have another question. What are the benefits that you can convey to the potential employers for hiring a person with disabilities? And if I could just add to that, this is from Eva, and I wanted to kind of expand it. If you could also talk a little bit about how you go about partnering with businesses in the community, like if you have any tips or just techniques that you found very useful, if you could talk about those. Sure.
So I'll answer that in a couple different ways, but one, we talked a little bit about doing the training on 3 cups of tea, but training your staff to understand the techniques for job search and job retention is really important. So if you haven't heard about that training, it's something to look at or participate in our webinar later on in this fall on that. But that was a way we trained our staff to be able to work with employers. If you look at our Disability Solutions at Work.org website, there are some tools there for tips for employers, but there also is on our AbilityBeyond.org resource page too. But basically, we talked about different tax incentives such as the WOTC, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, or Ticket to Work, as I'm sure some of you know, is a national program that builds some incentives for employers. We talked about, we'll sit with an employer and say, what does your retention and turnover look like, and how can we help you with that? So are you dealing with people that, you're constantly hiring? As we all know, people with disabilities are really a very dedicated group, and being at work is not the issue. They'll be at work. So we talked a little bit about that. And like I said, we have tools listed on our site, so hopefully those are some tips for you that could help.
And one of the major sales in New York State is the work tryout opportunity through Access VR, where an employer is able to keep somebody on their payroll for 90 days, and Access VR will reimburse that person's wages for those 90 days.
We also have some questions, some hands raised. I'm going to ask Nicole to go through those and unmute people's lines.
Yep, I have Peggy DiMartino. Do you have another question? I've unmuted you.
No question, thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, and William?
When you spoke earlier about having, in your sheltered workshop, employers who you were doing piecework for had space in their facility where the work could be done there. Did the consumers who go there still maintain sub-minimum wages, or were you able to pay them at the minimum wage?
That's a great question too. When we did this back then, it was minimum wage. So they moved, I'm sorry, sub-minimum wage. So they moved from sub-minimum wage to sub-minimum wage. However, now, as we're all evolving and knowing that competitive employment is the ultimate goal, we're changing the way those are. So they're it decreases the number of people that they employ over time, but we're getting more and more individuals to be making over competitive employment doing the work that they expect us to do. So at the time it was sub-minimum to sub-minimum, but now it's evolving to not be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another question from Linda Campbell. She is asking, how many days a week do people usually participate in your program, and what are they doing on the days that they are not in the program? So I know you talked about, having alternatives to work that people participate in, but if you have a sense of people who maybe only come to program 2 or 3 days a week, if you know what they're doing on the days that they don't come into your programs.
Yeah, so some of those people are doing ComHab, and for the most part, it depends on the funding. So there's a blend of programming. If somebody is not coming to work on a particular to program on a particular day, it might be that they're working. They're competitively employed, and that is not considered as a part of the day program. So they may have an employment specialist supporting them on those days. And we do have in our program, people are doing a blend of that. They probably work 2 days per week, and they come to program on other days. It might be just the support that they're receiving from a ComHab worker doing, travel training or skill building in the community.
Okay, Shaileen. We have another question from another Linda. This is from Linda Isles. She is asking, what do the services look like today? Are some currently funded with community pre-vote dollars? And what are the ratios? How many of the people are employed, and what are the average hours that they're working?
So our ratios, to answer that question, is a 1 to 4. That was something that we established. That is what we wanted to achieve and felt safe, and we felt good about being in the community. So for our community activities, it's a 1 to 4 staff ratio, to answer that. To answer how many people do we, out of that 189 that we have employed, I don't know. I mean, that we've changed so much. That original 189 is completely different. We've evolved to really expand our, what we call our career development employment services in both states, which we serve over 1,000 people in to only find competitive employment each year. So as people continue to age out of high school, we're really pushing employment as the first option, and not sub minimum wages, but competitive employment. But we still do have some people that have been around since then, since our 2003, and we still have a special certificate and still do pay a handful of people sub minimum wage, and that number continues to decrease year after year for us as we don't accept anyone into that any longer. Does that answer your question, Linda? I don't remember if you were a hand or a question. Sorry.
It's a writing, but Linda, if that does, if you have more of a question, if you want to raise your hand,
sorry about that.
Nicole can unmute you.
Linda, I have unmuted you if you'd like to speak.
Yes, that does answer. The only other part of it, though, is there any community pre-voc funding that's utilized to support people?
We're not currently utilizing community pre-voc, only because we're not currently providing that service in New York State. But you could, if you already have that funding, you absolutely can use that as part of your funding.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Nicole, are there any other questions that have been, any other hands raised?
I noticed, William, you have your hand raised. Do you have another question? I've unmuted you.
No, I think that was from previous.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. No, I do not have any more hands raised.
Okay, well, thank all of you for taking the time to participate in this webinar. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, Shaileen and Carrie will be presenting parts 2 and 3 of this series. Webinar number 2 will be about person-centered planning and shared decision-making, and that will be on September 16th. And then on September 28th, they'll be offering the 3rd webinar, which is called Zero Exclusion, 3 Cups of Tea, and Rapid Job Placement. I encourage you to, watch for the announcement, to register for those. And I also want to point out that if you complete the Employment Supports Transformation Assessment, you can have that interpreted. You can also access individualized consultations with Ability Beyond that could help you, just kind of deal with some of the individual issues your organization might be encountering. So, this is, as we said in our blast-off events, this is kind of a step-by-step process. You're watching a Strategy 1 webinar, but you're also able to access additional supports that are more individualized to your needs through the Strategy 2 resources through the grant. So at this time, if there's no other questions, I think we'll close the webinar. Thank you very much, Carrie and Shaileen. We really appreciate your taking the time to work with us and to be a partner in this project.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you all of you. Look forward to future webinars.
So do we. Thank you, guys. Bye now.